Hello, good evening. Thanks for being with us. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Really was a day of convincing when you think about it. The president tonight with the hard sell to Republicans to try to get his agenda passed.
We don't want to have grandstanders where one or two people raise their vote. We don't know, and they do it to grandstand. That's all. Not good people. They know who I'm talking about. I call them out.
How he was dealt, though, a big blow from someone that you might not even know. We are live from the White House tonight with the president's top economic advisor. So what are they planning to do now? We'll be asking them. And this morning, the Pentagon with its own pushback, releasing this footage right here of the bunker-busting bombs in action. But questions now being asked about the location of Iran's uranium and the fight for and against socialism. How New York's Mayor Eric Adams responded today as Democrats all across the country are being asked if they support a socialist who could run America's biggest city. But first tonight, here from the Hill, the full court press at the Pentagon this morning, 8 a.m. sharp. And just around 5 o'clock here in Washington, the president with a rallying cry from the White House, trying to get support for the one big, beautiful bill that was dealt a bit of a blow. We begin tonight with our Kelly Meyer. Meyer, you were all over the place today, in the room with the president this afternoon, at the Pentagon this morning. That was kind of how the White House framed this day up.
Yeah, exactly. It started at the Pentagon, it went into the White House press briefing room, and then into the East Room. So we just got out of that East Room event. President Trump on his way out saying that he hopes Congress gets this one big beautiful bill, as he calls it, done by July 4th. That's next week. And that's the deadline that he set for lawmakers to get this bill to his desk.
Today I signed this bill into law. Almost every major promise made in the 2024 campaign already will have become a promise kept.
So filing in behind President Trump, you see there, were the people that he believes will benefit from this bill. There were angel moms with more border control funding lined up there. There were also linemen and truckers with no tax on overtime in the bill, and auto workers talking about tax cuts. So White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said earlier today in the White House press briefing that she's seen senators roll out from the White House this week, as she puts it, after meetings with the president, but she didn't quite name names, Blake.
All right, so that was this afternoon. Tell me about the morning, the Pentagon video, questions to the Defense Secretary. What was going on?
Yeah, a lot in that briefing, and really the Pentagon officials, the Pentagon heads there, were focusing on the military men and women that carried out the strikes and protected our U.S. airbase from attack, some as young as 21 years old. The chairman saying today, quote, they absolutely crushed it. I was pressing the Pentagon officials there, from the Secretary of Defense to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, about the intel assessment and when that will be released once it is completed, and if it will be. Take a listen.
Whatever is supposed to be made public will be, but whatever has to stay sensitive.
Sir, I'm confident we'll find the middle ground, but there are some things that if asked, I'd want to not release.
The chairman adding there that it's a balancing act between keeping the privacy and secrecy of these missions, but also being transparent with the American public, Blake.
All right, our Kelly Meyer live tonight on the North Lawn. Kelly, thank you. And up on Capitol Hill, senators today, some of them at least, receiving a classified briefing this afternoon on the strikes. After that briefing was postponed earlier this week, our Tom Dempsey getting reaction from them after they left that meeting today. Tom?
Hey, good evening, Blake, from Capitol Hill. Here's the thing. This Senate classified briefing all took place behind closed doors, meaning no cameras inside or anywhere near this secure room. Believe me, we tried. But here's the thing. That really makes the reactions from lawmakers about the information that was shared that much more key to all of this. And we saw two big takeaways. Republicans saying that the information highlighted the success of that mission over the weekend of those U.S. bombers hitting the Iranian nuclear facilities. But on the other side, Democrats said the information shared raised more concerns, with one of them even saying the information showed President Donald Trump has been lying to the American public. Take a listen.
The allegations that we have obliterated their program just don't seem to stand up to reason.
I, for one, am comforted by having a president who is decisive, We took action to protect America, to protect our ally Israel, and at least for a while take away the threat of a nuclear Iran.
Yeah, we also heard from other Democrats, including Senator Mark Warner, the vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who said it's far too early to issue any sort of bold statements about the impact of those bombings. But again, we'll get more reactions tomorrow when there's another secure briefing for House members, Blake.
Our Tom Dempsey live tonight up on Capitol Hill. Tom, thank you. So the administration, in a way, is digging in its heels a bit, pushing back all day on the report suggesting that the bunker-busting bombs was not a success.
You want to call it destroyed, you want to call it defeated, you want to call it obliterated, choose your word. This was an historically successful attack, and we should celebrate it as Americans, and it gives us a chance to have peace, chance to have a deal, and an opportunity to prevent a nuclear Iran.
President Trump coming to this conclusion today about the alleged leak, claiming, quote, the Democrats are the ones who leaked the information on the perfect flight to the nuclear sites in Iran, adding, quote, they should be prosecuted. Joining me now, Republican Congressman from the state of Georgia, Rich McCormick, a member of the House Armed Services Committee, a doctor as well, served in the Navy, served in the Marines. Hello, sir.
Good to see you today.
Thanks for being with us. I'll ask you on camera here what I was just saying to you as Kelly was reporting and Tom were reporting, which is, when do you think the American public starts to see that assessment?
I think we'll find out the things that are unclassified fairly rapidly. I think we like to, especially if it's success. There's certain things that we in the military can't talk about even years after it's been done.
Right.
There's certain things that we used to plan. I can't even talk about what we planned to do that we didn't do.
Okay.
So it depends on what kind of classification it is. But I think once we're briefed as Congress members, there's seldom a secret. I literally, every time I sit in a brief,
right,
it's live tweeted, even if it's supposed to be a confidential brief. So that's why, by the way, that's why we are not briefed on secret plans before we go into country, because I don't trust Congress. Even as a military guy, you have very compartmentalized information so that won't be leaked out and put our men and women at harm's risk.
Let me ask you, because there's a question about the uranium inside Iran and where it may or may not be at this point. Here was Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary, and Senator Cotton after that briefing earlier today.
You know for certain that the uranium was removed from the facility before the B-2 struck?
So I'm not aware of any intelligence that I've reviewed that says things were not where they were supposed to be.
I don't have a comment on that. I will say it was not part of the mission to destroy all their enriched uranium or to seize it or anything else.
What'd you make of what the senator said there? Because he said it was not part of the mission. So then I guess the question is, where is it and what Iran may or may not be able to do with it?
I'm not sure we know, and I'm not sure I'm going to get briefed on what the actual truth of the matter is. I don't know how much we do know. What I do know is that we took out the capacity to continue to enrich uranium right now. We've definitely made them rethink their whole objective of destroying America, destroying Israel, being openly defiant about that sort of approach to life. But quite frankly, in all negotiations we've done up to this point, they're the big winners. Everything, Iran, think about it. Every time they negotiate, they get money. They get money freed up. They win every single time we had negotiations with them. What did we get out of it? Did they stop their nuclear program? Of course not. That's why we're at where we're at. Every time, whether it be Obama delivering pallets of cash or Biden saying, yeah, we'll free up this money that's been frozen. As a matter of fact, we'll allow you to make more money through oil sales. That has only resulted in an accelerated program. And that's the whole reason we're negotiating with them. They've won every single negotiation until this point. So at least it's a reset of what the negotiation point is, which is we are not going to allow you to have nuclear arms, especially while you're chanting death to America, which they're still doing.
Did the president not play it right then in the first term?
You talking about President Trump?
Yeah.
I think President Trump was much harder on than Biden or Obama, but I think they were much further away from their end objective of becoming a nuclear power. By the way, if you look at what they're polling in their nation, the people still want to be a nuclear power because it gives them it makes them feel good that they're not going to be attacked, because once you're a nuclear power, it changes the whole dynamics of international relationships.
So that was the Pentagon this morning, and then as Kelly reported, the president had his big sort of, come on guys, let's get this done, the one big beautiful bill event this afternoon. Here's what the president said on one of his signature campaign policies, and then I'll get your reaction.
A waitress came over, and I said, how are you doing? She said, not good, sir. Why? The government is killing me on tips. And she looked at me, she said, "Sir, there should be no tax on tips." I said, "Say it again." "There should be no tax on tips." I said, "That's the coolest thing I've ever heard."
All right, so he promised that. He promised no tax on overtime and a whole bunch of other things on the campaign trail. Not to get too wonky, to put it in English, the Senate parliamentarian ruled against you guys today on Medicaid. And now there's a question of, okay, what happens here? What do you think the Senate is going to do? And are they going to try to essentially jam you guys in the House?
Well, the interesting thing is, and I'm learning as we go, because this is my second term. We've never had the Senate before and the presidency together during my term, and I'm a doctor, not a lawyer.
Right.
But what I say is it's interesting to see that the parliamentarian can be overruled by Senator Thune, but he's choosing not to do it because he already set precedent so that the Democrats can do the same thing if they become in charge.
Are you among the Republicans who believe that Thune should try to fire her?
That's a tough question because, once again, we're setting precedents.
Right.
That's basically overruling her. You got to be careful what you do because it can be used against you the next term.
Yeah.
Just like if you stack the Supreme Court, who's going to say that you're not going to do more of the same the next time? So precedent is really important. Okay. We have a tradition in Congress, in the Senate, and I want to be careful not to speak out of turn before I deliberate on this because this is new to me too.
Okay.
And matter of fact, most of the people in Congress, you got to remember, have not been here for that long.
So what happens if, and I'll leave you with this, what happens if the Senate says, okay, here's what we have. President Trump says 4th of July, you guys got to get this to my desk. And they say, Congressman, there you go. House Republicans sign off on it. Are you guys generally going to take that?
I don't think you have enough votes to be jammed like that. And from what I understand, the Speaker's been very clear. He is in direct contact with Senator Thune over all this and understands that Thune has to get as close to what we had as possible, or else we're going to have a mini rebellion. You see, it only takes a few votes.
Yeah.
To stop this. We have less wiggle room in the Congress than they do in the Senate.
Right.
And that's a rare thing. And so I think when you talk about whether you be salt people or land people or fiscal hawks, there's a lot of balancing act we did to get it over to the Senate. And if they tinker with it too much, it's going to be trouble.
We'll leave it there. Congressman McCormick, thank you, sir. Nice to have you in studio. We talk virtually all the time.
Great to be there. Semper Fi.
Nice to see you. Still to come tonight here on the Hill. This is now not the issue, because there's lots of them, but a really big issue for the president and for the White House. And his top economic advisor joins me live on the other side of the break. We are taking you to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. What does the White House do next? We're asking them. Stay with us. Thanks for being with us. I'm Blake Berman. I'll see you on the other side in 4 minutes.
Our country back and bring it back strong, and our country is going to be stronger, bigger, better than ever before.
President Trump just a little while ago hosting an event for the One Big Beautiful Bill over at the White House, and tonight there are serious questions starting to form on the president's signature bill that aims to enact his legislative agenda. Elizabeth McDonough, the Senate parliamentarian, essentially a referee on what can and cannot be allowed in this spending bill on the Senate side, rejected key Medicaid provisions, which Republicans say are central to cutting spending. McDonough rejecting a cap on states who want to collect more funding for Medicaid. Her ruling also strikes down provisions targeting states who use Medicaid money for illegal immigrants. Senate Republicans, some of them fuming. For example, the Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville even calling for McDonough's removal. President Trump wants the spending bill on his desk by Independence Day. That is just 8 days away. And one of the men in the middle of all of this for the president and the White House is Stephen Myron. He is the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors. First time here on the Hill, I believe. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So what do you all do now? Given that this big decision was made about Medicaid, which has been talked about time and again, and now Senate Republicans have to figure out what's next. What is next?
Yeah, so look, the legislative process goes through a large number of steps before you finally get to a bill that's passed by both chambers and then signed by the president and enacted into law. And what the House produced was a draft, and what the Senate produced was a draft. And there will be changes, and it wouldn't shock me if many of the provisions ultimately found their way in because of one channel or another. But that's for really the Senate to decide, and for the House to decide, and for them to negotiate with each other and abide by their internal rules and figure out the way to get the bill over the line with their own internal rules. It's not for me to interject myself into that process, but what I would say is the process is underway, and that there's a number of hoops hoops that folks jump through, and that just as there would ultimately have been changes from the initial draft the House put out into the final bill that's enacted into law. It wouldn't shock me if there are ultimate changes from the draft the Senate put out, and some of those passages may find themselves back in with the wording changed in a way that complies with the parliamentarians' requirements. We'll see.
So as I hear you talk about this as a draft on both sides, the House did pass it as a bill, obviously, to send it over to the Senate. Is the July 4th timeframe reasonable?
Oh, yeah, the July 4th deadline. Look, I acknowledge that is ambitious, but we have set ambitious targets the entire time. People said it was ambitious for the House to release a bill by mid-May. People said it was ambitious for the House to pass a bill by Memorial Day. But you know what? The House delivered, and we succeeded. We delivered on those ambitious targets. And so is July 4th an ambitious target, too? It absolutely is. But we've got a good track record of delivering into those ambitions.
Senator John Fetterman, you know him well. He's, at times, Republicans love him, right? Because he'll move on both directions. Here he was today, and I want to get your reaction on the other side.
I would hope that we just don't try to ramrod this through before the July 4th break. I mean, if this is so important, it's going to impact millions and millions of Americans. At least take your time to do it in the right way and just wait till after the break.
So look, deadlines, as you mentioned, it is a deadline. It's ambitious, as I hear you. But is the real deadline, Stephen, August and the debt limit? Because as you know, that has to be raised.
Look, I think Senator Fetterman is being very irresponsible here. Very irresponsible to vote against a bill like this, because what you are doing is voting for the biggest tax hike in history that will increase taxes by $4 trillion in Americans and plunge the economy into recession. And the idea that we can put off passing this bill is really wrong, because A, you're voting for that tax hike if you vote against the bill, but B, if you push out the deadline, the economy, markets, companies, CEOs start to wonder, are you really going to do it? Are you going to get it passed? Are we going to have that $4 trillion tax hike? And right now, they're confident that we're going to pass the bill because we've been so successful in moving the process along. But if that confidence starts to ebb, that'll seep into the economy. If people start to think, hey, this thing is dragging on, we might have a $4 trillion tax hike, they hold off on investments, they hold off on hiring, they put off economic decisions, and that's really, really bad, because then the economy slips into a recession because they expect that tax hike. And so what Senator Fetterman said is irresponsible to support the biggest tax hike in history, and it's irresponsible to not give the economy the certainty it requires around the path of tax rates.
You think there's a recession, as I hear you there, a recession if it's not passed?
Oh, absolutely. Look, you don't implement the biggest tax hike in history because Congress fails to do its duty and then expect the economy not to go into a recession. But that is exactly why the Republican Party is so united on the need to get the bill over the line, because we know that if we don't get the bill over the line, it is, as I said, a $4 trillion tax hike, a 4% hole in the economy, millions of people lose their jobs, 9 million people lose their health insurance as a result. It would be a disaster. And so everybody knows the absolute imperative to get this bill over the line.
The president, Stephen, he keeps talking about Jay Powell. Here he was today on the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and I want to get your reaction on the other side.
If we had a person over at the Fed that would lower interest rates a little bit, that would be helpful too. It's hard to believe this is on top of, we have to fight this guy. He's not doing the job.
Here's why I bring it up. Wall Street Journal this morning, exclusive. Trump considers naming next Fed chair early in bid to undermine Powell. The president has toyed with the idea of selecting and announcing Powell's replacement by September or October, according to people familiar with the matter. Jay Powell's term is up next May. Is it the belief that Donald Trump, the president, will name his nominee to replace Jay Powell by the end of October?
Look, who knows how these things are going to develop? Obviously, you would be nuts to think that the president wasn't thinking about who he would want in a role like that because of how important that role is for the economy and how important it is to keep the economy on track. Is that name going to be announced one particular day or another particular day? I don't know. It's too difficult to forecast that far out. As we just sort of went back and forth about forecasting legislative activity and administration and economic policy on a 2-week horizon, and now you're asking me to think about exactly the day when the Fed is going to.
Okay, so let me go broader. Let me go broader then for a second, because in politics you elect a president, and during the transition, you know, the country sort of looks at the upcoming and not necessarily the outgoing, even though they are the president, right? And I guess this gets to the concept of the idea of sort of a shadow-fed president signaling, listen to them and not Powell, and whether the president believes that should happen.
Look, I think that the president is very much entitled to views on monetary policy, just as everyone is, and he's made it very clear what he thinks should happen. And I want to emphasize that the president actually has a really great track record on this subject. In 2018, 2019, he was right that there was no inflation, there was no need to raise interest rates, and eventually the Fed came around to his view. And in 2021, he was right that inflation was a huge problem and the Fed needed to hike interest rates, and eventually they came around to his view. So he is entitled to these views on monetary policy. He has a track record of being correct. I think eventually the Fed will come around to his view again, too. The question is when. And given that track record, he's got a right to want someone in that seat who he thinks will do a good job.
All right, we'll leave it there. Stephen Myron is the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors here tonight on the Hill. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks.
Got it. Still much more ahead tonight here on the Hill. The other side of the aisle, and a whole lot of attention there. Yes, it is a race in New York City, but my goodness, are the ripple effects being felt all across the country when the Hill returns.
Utilize the letter F for faith. Yes. Our opponents use the letter F for profanity. Yes. So we need to stay focused.
That, of course, the New York City Mayor Eric Adams launching his re-election campaign as a political earthquake, really, in New York is sending aftershocks nationwide. Adams now running as an independent. Today's announcement comes, of course, after the victory of the Democratic mayoral primary race. The 33-year-old self-proclaimed Democratic socialist, Zoran Mamdani, beating the former governor in that state, Andrew Cuomo. And there soon could be another shakeup in New York, as our Julia Manchester reports tonight. And the timing here is not coincidental. We will get into this in a second. That the New York Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik is set to run for governor against Kathy Hochul. Our Henna Doba live in New York, joining us now with some pushback today from Eric Adams, especially on the front as it comes to socialism. Henna.
That is the main word these days. Hi, Blake. Always good to see you, my friend. So what I can take from it, the message that came across loud and clear to me, number one, people, just like in November, are still really focused on costs in the economy and their own kitchen table, math, economy. They're looking for a new generation of leadership. So when he announced his run for re-election this afternoon, Adams never mentioned his presumed Democratic opponent, but the incumbent did not mince words when it comes to Mamdani's views. Take a listen.
This is not a city where you use idealism to state you're giving everything to everyone for free. There's no dignity in someone giving you everything for free. There's dignity in giving you a job so you can provide for your family and the opportunities that you deserve. So this is not a city of handouts. This is a city of hands up.
Very passionate. Blake, like you just mentioned, the GOP is painting self-proclaimed socialist Mamdani as a new face of the Democratic Party, alarming moderate Democrats as the National Party continues to lick its wounds from last November's presidential election. As for Adams, who is a Democrat turned independent, he's taking full advantage, promising he will not throw away all the progress his team has made to a socialist who will tear it all down with false promises he can't keep. But it seems New Yorkers, well, they're ready for a change. New polling numbers just in from the Honan Strategy Group, and this is interesting. It shows the Democratic frontrunner leading Adams with a healthy 46% to 31%. If there's a big if here, Andrew Cuomo is not on the ballot come November. We'll be watching closely as New Yorkers make their final votes November 4th. Also looking forward to that scoop by Julia Manchester. That's huge news about Elise Stefanik.
We'll connect the dots here in a second. Henna Doba for us live tonight. Henna, thank you.
Thank you.
Mamdani's win is a wake-up call for Democrats, or is it not? The Michigan Democratic Senator Alyssa Slotkin, born in New York City, asked today about Mamdani's victory.
What I can take from it, the message that came across loud and clear, I guess, to me, was, number one, people, just like in November, are still really focused on costs in the economy and their own kitchen table math. And they're looking for a new generation of leadership.
All right, joining me now, Mick Mulvaney, NewsNation contributor, former Trump White House chief of staff, and Dan Cannon, former Battleground States director for both the Biden and Harris campaigns. Hello to you both.
All right.
I was going to start with you, but if you want to,
he's ready to go. I got to Cannon. So I'm sitting there watching Slotkin, and all I could think of was 2011. John Boehner was sitting in the exact same chair right after the Tea Party movement. What he was saying was, what this really means is that voters care about spending and fiscal discipline. And he was out of a job 3 years later. Tell me this isn't the end of the establishment of the Democrat Party, that Chuck Schumer's out of a job, that you guys are now going with your progressive movement where we went with our Tea Party movement 10 years ago.
I've got another analogy for you, Mick. In 2018, a young insurgent Democratic Socialist won in a contested New York primary against a long incumbent, Joe Crowley. That was AOC. And everyone predicted that meant 2018 would be the year of the insurgent socialist candidate. But the House elected Alyssa Slotkin and Gretchen Whitmer and Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill and a whole host of moderates who are now winning statewide seats, and that's going to happen again in 2026.
True, but you would have elected Bernie Sanders but for Jim Clyburn's intervention in the South Carolina primary.
We would have elected Mike Bloomberg had he had a better debate against Elizabeth Warren. Actually, it's the real story of that election.
Do I get to ask the questions now or no?
You worked for Bloomberg, wasn't that?
Yeah. Dan ran the presidential campaign for Bloomberg.
We could do this show without you. You know that, right?
Go for it. So here's where I'm going. I've heard MAGA for 10 years, right?
Yeah.
10 years. Anytime Trump says something, folks in this building, that building, get asked, what about blah, 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 right? And so I just heard Alyssa Slotkin in that soundbite say, oh, well, energy and youth, and turn the page. Senator Slotkin, do you support rent freeze on rate stabilized tenants? Let's show the policy position. Do you support city-owned grocery stores? Do you support a $30 minimum wage by 2030? Do you support not condemning globalize the intifada? Right? I can go on and on and on and on down the list, Dan, and that's going to be the issue for Democrats, is it not?
Maybe for some, but I think, Blake, there'd be a boogeyman, whether it was AOC or Nancy Pelosi or Mamdani. It's going to happen regardless. And I think if you're Slotkin, or let's stay in Michigan, I mentioned Haley Stevens last night. She's leading in that contested primary in Michigan against some other more liberal, more online kind of folks in that primary. And she will answer those questions, I think, in a very moderate way that displays a commitment to being on the side of working class voters, to being on the side of lowering prices, to showing that you're not out of touch. I think that's the key lesson here, really, is don't be out of touch.
Is there a difference, though, between Michigan and New York? Doesn't New York and Illinois and California, they're the bellwether states? That's where your party is going. Michigan was a state, I think, that Donald Trump won in 2024. So it's still a swing state at some level. So I hear what you're saying about Michigan, but what do you say about New York? I mean, is Chuck Schumer going to run again? And if he can he win? Or is it just going to be the next Democrat socialist who's going to beat him in a Republican primary?
Look, there's a couple things that are interesting to me about the race. And I'm not a New York City political expert, even though I work for Mike Bloomberg. We weren't focused on New York City. Right. But I will say the conventional wisdom going into that primary was that Zoran could win, but probably with lower turnout, because the bigger the electorate, the broader the electorate, the more diverse the electorate, that's going to favor Cuomo with better name ID and more moderates in the race, and that's going to help the guy with sort of the incumbent kind of vibe to him. It was a pretty high turnout election, and it was persuasion, and he won with some of those voters that Cuomo would have won with. The broad support was bigger there. Part of that's a repudiation of Cuomo because he was a very flawed candidate. So let's put that out there. But I do think the fact that Mamdani focused so closely and consistently on cost, even though he's very far left, that's clear. Okay. But everything he talked about was cost. That's the left.
So it is not coincidental that the reporting from Julia Manchester of Elise Stefanik, likely to run for governor, comes now, because what is going to happen is she's going to try to tie Mamdani, right, to Kathy Hochul, and that's what you're going to see. But the question for you on your side of the aisle and how some of the folks from your side are handling this, Mick, Congressman Andy Ogle, Zohan Little Mohammed Mamdani is an anti-Semitic socialist communist who would destroy the great city of New York. He needs to be deported, which is why I'm calling for him to be subject to denaturalization proceedings. I mean, you want your party going down that road?
No, it's not illegal to be anti-Semitic. It's not illegal to be socialist. It's not illegal to be communist. The guy's a citizen. I mean, fair and square. Let's just go out and beat him. Let's not try and use lawfare to try and accomplish our ends. That's not helpful.
What do you expect your party to do?
Back in 2000, I think it was 16, Mark Sanford was running for a congressional seat in South Carolina and was getting his butt kicked by a Democrat we'd never heard of. And he stopped debating that person and started debating a cardboard cutout of Nancy Pelosi. True story. And one going away. Okay. You're going to see that again and again. We love it when the Democrats give us these extreme candidates who are well known. So if he does become well known nationwide, and you can expect
the right-wing press of this country to make him well-known. He does give us that boogeyman to run against, which we love.
All right. You want to read the teas and take us to break, or are you good?
No, let you do something.
These two back on the other side of the break. By the way, other side of the break. So the big story, right, or one of them. No tax on tips. The president was talking about it earlier today. Listen.
I said, ladies and gentlemen, please announce tonight there will be no tax on tips. And a legend was made.
But earlier today, he got a bad ruling, at least for Republicans in the Senate. And I asked the White House a little while ago, so what are you going to do about it? And Mick picked up on something. We're going to play that soundbite for you on the other side and what you should expect to hear going forward when we return.
Saturday, a NewsNation special. John Stossel, America's most outspoken libertarian, sounds off on the fight for freedom.
You need a chainsaw for this.
John Stossel, Give Me Liberty. Saturday at 7, 6 Central on NewsNation.
Nation hasn't been a light news day. Here's how the administration sort of framed up today. Started first thing in the morning, a press conference involving the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff over at the Pentagon saying, you know what? Don't doubt the success of the targeted airstrikes against Iran. That was at about 8 a.m. this morning. And then to end the workday here in Washington just a little while ago, President Trump over at the White House trying to sell his signature campaign promise.
The one big, beautiful bill to secure our borders, turbocharge our economy, and bring back the American dream. That's what's happening, too. It's met with tremendous approval and reception.
And if you think about it, those are really the two big stories before the president at this hour and really at this day and the coming days. Iran, the decision he made last week, and the one big, beautiful bill, and what Republicans will do with it this upcoming week. Full panel here with me now. Mick Mulvaney, back again, NewsNation political contributor, former Trump chief of staff. Taryn Rosencrantz is a Democratic strategist. Jessica Anderson, former budget official in the first Trump administration. Dan Cannon, back with me again, former Battleground States director in the Biden and Harris campaigns. Hello to you all. Nice to see you. I had to bring both of you in because these two tried to take my job in the last break. So that's how the day started, was over at the Pentagon. Pete Hegseth. And a little bit of show and tell with the bunker busting bombs. And it ended over at the White House with the president saying, you know what, you guys got to pass this one big, beautiful bill. But I'm not sure, Jessica, folks imagined what would happen today, which was someone who no one outside of Washington has any clue of, is the Senate parliamentarian saying, you know what, you guys can't do what you want to do on Medicaid. How big of a problem is that?
Well, Elizabeth is back in the news. We've heard from her before. She's not a new name to many of us. I think it's interesting, right? So there's some Republicans that are saying, okay, she needs to be fired. She was put in place by Chuck Schumer. Others are worried about the precedent that this might set going forward. I think at the end of the day, this is playing out exactly as we expected it to. The Senate is going to have some sausage making, but at the end of the day, they are going to produce a bill that the House is going to pass and send to the president's desk. Now, can they do it by the 4th or the 5th as the president wants? I think that's going to depend on how the next 24 hours goes.
Producing a bill, which is 1,000 pages plus, and
at least
and
right
getting it right from your side of the aisle are two different things, though.
Well, I think the bigger picture is what's most important here. Is it going to provide funding for the border? Is it going to extend Trump's tax cuts? The additional things that they're talking about today that the parliamentarian threw out about the pay-fors, Thune can override that, of course. Okay. He can also push back on Elizabeth. They can go back to Senate Finance. So there's
calling her by her first name.
Well, you know, she's a first. We're first name basis now at this point. This isn't the first time she's meddled.
So I interviewed the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors like 25 minutes ago here on the Hill, Stephen Myron, and I asked him about this. Let's roll that soundbite because Mulvaney picked up on something. Roll it.
Wouldn't shock me if there are ultimate changes from the draft the Senate put out, and some of those passages may find themselves back in with the wording changed in a way that complies with the parliamentarians' requirements. We'll see.
Why did that stand out to you?
Because I don't think he came up with that himself. The guy's a genius economist, but I don't think he understands how the Senate works. This is the talking point from the White House, okay? And this is what they're trying to push to the Republicans in both the House and the Senate, which is just calm down. Jess is right. There's going to go back with new language. They're going to try and figure out a way to jump through the hoops to get these Medicaid changes. I think they'll get most of them. And I think Jess is ultimately right. Ultimately, the Senate will pass this bill. The House will pass this bill. I'm with you, though. I don't think it can happen by July 4th. But I was very interested that everybody sort of, that's the new message from the White House. Don't give up yet, because there's still hope for these Medicaid changes.
Is she your new best friend?
I mean, look, the ruling here, to understand what this is about whether states can expand and continue to expand on Medicaid and Medicare and Obamacare in a way that accesses federal funding to keep folks insured. And they're trying to make that impossible for states to do, which is going to kick tens of millions off of the rolls. It's the biggest cut to Medicare and Medicaid in the history of the programs, all to pay for those big tax cuts. And I agree with you. I think that Republicans will crawl over broken glass to deliver tax cuts for billionaires. If they have to cut Medicaid down to the bone to do it, they will do that. I do think the delay here is a problem, because there's 5 or 6 moderate Republicans, from Murkowski to Collins, Hawley and others, who do not like any of this. And they've been choking the poison down because they want to get these tax cuts. And this delay and having to come back at this another way does make things a little perilous in the Senate. And whatever they end up doing is going to make the House job even more difficult. I think without this problem, they could have jammed this through, and then the Senate bill is it. That's it. The House has to vote for it. They're done. Now I'm not so sure.
Deal breaker, or it gets done?
I mean, I think it's going to be really hard. You're finding 1 in 4 only thinks that this is going to help their families, and that's making it not so big and beautiful for anybody but billionaires. And I think that's going to be hard for everybody to swallow when they're seeing those numbers. And those polling numbers just continue to be 70% of people are not thinking that this is good. That's not good for them. And to rush it is going to be even more of a problem. You know, those are not good dynamics for them.
So the day started over at the Pentagon at 8 o'clock in the morning. Mick, am I onto something here that the White House tried to frame this with the Pentagon in the morning and the president in the afternoon? And before you answer that, I guess the larger point here is these are the 2 big issues before the president right now, is it not? And where does he go from here with it?
Yeah. Do I think it was done on purpose? Yes. What is Donald Trump really good at? He's good at a couple things. He's good at creating leverage. He's good at creating a show. That's what this was. Today was scripted. And if you're running the White House properly, that's what you're supposed to be doing. Biden did it, just didn't do it as well. Obama was really, really good at it. So yes, it doesn't surprise me. They started with the defense issue today, which is a good issue for them. They're finishing on the big piece of legislation they want to. That's exactly what you expect from a White House that's running properly.
Do you give the president credit for Iran?
I think right now there has been so much back and forth, and he has not seemed to make it very clear what he knew, when he didn't know, what he's done. I mean, cursing on the tarmac. I mean, he's not making himself looking like
there's a difference between messaging
really
and action, though. What about the actions?
Well, I think at this point, I would love to be able to give him credit for stuff if he could actually make a coherent statement about what he believes and what he knew and what he wants to know and who he's going to brief. I think it's really hard for me. I would love to give him credit. He makes it hard sometimes.
I think he was very clear today. I mean, Pete Hegseth this morning was crystal clear as well. The sites were obliterated. They were destroyed. It's conclusive. And it's not just him, right? The United Nations has confirmed that. The Iranian foreign minister has confirmed that. So you're seeing multiple sources confirm that this was a successful mission. And I think we should give the president credit for it.
Not hard for me to believe the sites were destroyed. That seems pretty evident. Even though we haven't had the official damage assessment and all the intelligence, that seems pretty evident by just the video you saw. But what we do not know is what happened to the enriched uranium. There were trucks there the day before. The fact that the president was talking about this publicly, which is not a great way to do an op like this, for several days, gave the Iranians time to get that enrichment out of there. And the problem that I have with the president's approach here is that we don't really know what the objectives were. He didn't bring the country along. There was no pretext. He didn't bring Congress along. Hold on. And
I mean, Obama was striking all over the place in 2016.
Well, sure, but on this particular point, if we're trying to curtail their program with inspectors and with a program to actually see where the enriched uranium was, we had them enriching at 3.5% on average under Obama, and now they have all the 60% enriched uranium, which now we've lost track of. That could put us in a worse position than we had.
Well, we don't know if we've lost track of it.
We don't know. But back to your question, can you give him credit? I don't know.
This is 15 years in the making, and it's
goes all the way
very
back to
clear.
2002 with, I mean, at least with Fordo.
He's been very clear. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. This put us one more step in that direction with conclusive evidence that this was successful, and all of America should cheer.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank y'all. Appreciate it. Still to come.
Nice job, Berman. Well done.
Thank you, Vic. Thank you, Vic. Vic will be back tomorrow. You want to come back tomorrow? Other side of the break. Something happened today missed it by just a fraction. But it's big news, and I'll explain it on the other side. Plus, Elizabeth Vargas reports is coming up next. A former CIA official joins her live on that intel assessment on the U.S. strikes. My take, other side of the break, I'll explain that fraction. Stay with us. In the last full week of the first half of 2025, and what have been the three biggest stories, at least politically, many would argue that they've been Donald Trump's three big launches. Trump launching his second term on January 20th, Trump launching quote-unquote Liberation Day, the massive worldwide tariffs on April 2nd, and just a handful of days ago, President Trump launching those B-2 bombers, sending them into Iran and striking nuclear facilities. Now, any one of these three events would have many skeptics for sure, and at least some experts predicting a price to pay on Wall Street. But would you look at this? The S&P 500 right over here, basically the broadest look at the United States stock market, up again today. Here's why I'm telling you that. It's closed at a fraction. It's got to be 61.44 to close at an all-time high. All-time high. It's right there. But I want you to zoom out at the S&P 500 over the last decade. And remember all the worries in April about what may or may not come? That ended up being April. Over the course of 10 years. Just a blip. And look at where we are now, nearing all-time highs. I say it all the time. If I knew what would come next with the market or the economy, I'd be telling you what would come next from my yacht. I don't know. No one else knows. But here's what you should consider. As the headlines pop up over the next 6 months and you hear all the predictions, something to keep in mind, the continued resilience and dominance of the American economy. And that's my take tonight. I thank you so much for watching us here on The Hill.